parables were a unique way for Jesus to challenge people and to tell them the story of what the community that he was eyeballing really should be like. Parables of the kingdom. So let's look at some slides that we have above. Okay, so here we go. Parables. I like this title. Somebody already got it for a book, so I cannot really use it or claim it. But Jesus' parables are stories with intent. They call you to do something. So let's take a look at that. So about if we had a modern parable like this. This is not mine. How about this? Listen to this modern day parable. A certain man received a letter from the IRS. He took it to his accountant to review in order to draft a reply to the IRS. The accountant, however, was arrested 3 days later for embezzling funds, and the man was left to solve the problem himself. Because he was late in his reply to the IRS, he was subject to a large penalty. Okay, so now assuming that this is a parable because it's short and there's some intent in here, I want you to think about who or what the main character is. There's a couple options here, right? Who or what do you think is the main character? And while you think about that, what do you think is the main point of the story? So typically I have students who would say, well, it's the certain man. Sometimes I have people say it's the accountant. Every once in a while, I have somebody who says it's the IRS. Points of the story, well, they vary. Some people say, don't let other people do your business. Other people say, do your stuff on time. Other people say, don't trust the IRS, and so on and so forth. Do you think there could be multiple characters? Do you think that the people different people can read this story and draw different conclusions and walk away with different points and then have different points of action? If you could know more information, what would you like to know? Now, typically at this point, I get questions about the story. I'm not talking about the story, because typically that's when people say, what was in the letter? How large was the penalty? If I could ask a question, I would want to know, where does this story come from? Is this from a book about parables? Is this within a play? Is this within a book of life's lessons? Where does this story come from? Okay, well, let's talk about parables, okay? So parables. We actually find parables in the Old Testament. We call them mashal. They don't look exactly the same as what you find in the New Testament, but we have them. We have parables of trees, different trees growing up. We have parables that people tell, stories of people coming with two babies, and there's the story of people saying if this is not your baby, then we'll cut it up, or a story being told about somebody stealing somebody's lamb and saying, that shouldn't be happening, and then the king and then the prophet says to the king, you're actually that man, that kind of thing. We find them in Jewish writings that are not the Bible. We find parables in Greco-Roman writings, like Greek fables, the turtle in the air. Of course, we find it in the New Testament, but then we also find them in writings that the people in the early churches do. They start to emulate what Jesus did. And then we find them in later Jewish writings, and there's some really cool ones. So we're familiar with it, but Jesus is really the master parable teller. So let's look at Jesus' parables. His parables seek to reveal the kingdom. It says something about Jesus' ideal for the communities. Like I said, they're stories with intent. They're supposed to convey something. And like the Old Testament prophets, Jesus told parables to make people think and then do something. But the do something always relates to God's ideas. They were short. There's some like the parable of the sower that's relatively longer, but compared to other parables, they're brief. They're told in a context. They were told to a certain audience for a certain purpose. And if they are told and incorporated into a gospel, then there's text before and text after. And they were, this is a kicker, they were meant to be heard. They were never meant to be read. So there's something about it, like puns, something meant to be heard. So let's look at a couple of examples. The Gospel of John does not have parables. So let's look at the synoptics. The Gospel of Mark has a lot of these agricultural ones. Parable of the sower, for example, growing seed, mustard seed, and wicked tenants. And the numbers there represent the chapters. The parables in Luke, when Luke deals with the marginalized, they're kind of fun, right? A lot of people know the parable of the Good Samaritan. Even if you did not grow up with Christianity, in America, we have something that's called the Good Samaritan rule. If you help somebody an accident and then the person, because of your interference, gets hurt worse or dies, you're kind of covered under the Good Samaritan rule. You tried. A friend at midnight, somebody knocks on the door. We call them the lost parables. Somebody lost a sheep, lost a coin, lost a son, and then something where somebody tries to get justice. So you see, this is all about good stuff. Parables in Matthew are more aimed at a Jewish audience, so they're a little bit more in your face. A parable of the unforgiving servant. I talked to you about labors in the vineyard. We talked about the Gospel of Matthew. And then some that are kind of like apocalyptic. They have to do with strong choices in life. What if life ends? So very, very typical there. But remember, in the end, they're just ways to communicate, ways to spur people on to action, and they were meant to be heard. And that's the parables.